Hey, hello everybody, my name is Mark Ferguson. I'm MD of More Fire Public Relations, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Steve Fleming, who's Financial Director of Favouritetable, the UK restaurant software business provider. And today, Steve and I are going to be having a fascinating chat about VAT and why it matters to restaurants. So, hi Steve, nice to see you. How are things?
Hi Mark, how are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. All the better for talking with you. It'd be really interesting to just sort of like pick your brains and hear your opinions on, how VAT can be utilized, I guess, in such a way that it can save money for restaurants. Because, it's a tough market out there, and we've got to sort of like save money, haven't we, somehow?
I know it's a hard world, and everyone's fighting for their margin and their and the business that's around. Yeah, very difficult times.
Okay, well, listen, I'll dive in with the first question on my list here, but I want to talk about the subject of gift cards, and why they actually matter for restaurants, and are they VATable in any shape or form? Tell me from your perspective, what's the big deal with gift cards for restaurants, and how does VAT factor into that?
Yeah, well, gift cards are really interesting, Mark. I mean, as interesting as a finance thing gets, anyway. They're a gift card is effectively you purchasing a method of paying, if you like. So for a restaurant, all that should represent is that you have a prepayment. So someone has paid for something, and a service in this case of a meal that you haven't yet taken advantage of. So there's no VAT chargeable on gift card income, because all you've done is purchased a method of paying for the food. So the service takes place when you actually go and buy the food, be it either as a takeaway or as a sit-down meal, and use the card to pay. So it's not for the restaurants. Instead of you don't go, oh, I've got a sale of a gift card, therefore I've got some income to put to my profit. What you've got is someone's given me some money in advance of me doing something, so it's like a deposit. I hold it until such time. And take something like Tesco Club Card as a slightly different example, but it is a payment method. You can also have expiries on gift cards. So you could, you wouldn't be short term, but say you had a 3-year expiry, anyone who then bought a gift card and it hadn't been utilised by the end of the expiry date, then you can take it as income.
Right. So, I mean, what seems to the customer, and actually is to the customer, as a nice gift to give somebody, there's actually a series of real advantages to restaurant owners, both from a VAT perspective, I guess, but also the practicality of, in some cases, I imagine people don't always cash in those gift cards, do they?
No, there's some interesting stats around gift cards in around the place, and literally 10-20% of them just never get utilised. I mean, I work with other businesses, and one of which is a charity which sells gift cards and in their gift shop, and they've got 50 grand of gift card purchased which haven't been used. But unfortunately, they haven't got expiry, so they're just going to sit there forever. But it's a huge chunk of income. And for a restaurant, as for any other business with a gift card, the advantage of it is you've got the money. So just say you bought me a gift card, go to my favourite restaurant that's on Favouritetable selection. You are giving me the gift of the thing. The restaurant has got the money. So then when I go to book, and in effect, it won't work exactly for my booking, but they've then got an advance of money that they can use to buy ingredients to fund the business. So gift cards are actually quite a good method, if you like, of pre-fund. So it's cash flow advantage as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really considered this before. So just to be clear, where the VATable element only comes into play at the point of redemption. Have I understood that correctly?
Absolutely right. I should have used the word redemption. Redemption is the right word, yes.
Right, okay.
Because the VAT is all about receiving a service. You've not received a service when you buy the gift card. You've bought the right to a service.
Right, so going back to that kind of 10 to 20% of potentially cards never being redeemed, you've basically got money in your cash flow where VAT is, basically not paid until or if those cards ever do come actually into use. Yeah,
absolutely right.
Right. Okay. So I can see some obvious benefits there. So, from your own experience, is this something that many restaurants are taking advantage of, or do you think perhaps some people are missing?
Very few. I mean, I think, am I allowed to name names? But I mean, I went to Gaucho with my wife a few weeks ago, and they do vouchers, as they call it, but it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? Because they all work the same way. And, you know, I've not seen a lot of it, if I'm honest, but I mean, it's certainly something that you could offer, but possibly the platform Favouritetable could offer them on behalf of the collective restaurants that they deal with.
Let's talk about deposits in restaurants, you know, another area where I think a number of companies are using this increasingly, partly, I guess, to ensure no-shows, you know, people not actually turning up for the meal and place that they've booked. So talk to me a little bit about VAT on the deposit side of things. Is that charged immediately? And if not, when is it redeemed?
So in fairness, the deposit will work in exactly the same way for VAT as the gift card. All you've done is you've reserved your place. You've not done anything. You've not really received your service. Your service will be when you turn up for your meal. So, but given that a deposit is probably a relatively short term, so your cash flow advantage is relatively short. But the advantage more, what I would consider more the advantage for the restaurant is you can plan your covers better.
Right. Okay. And tell me a bit more about that. Explain the covers issue. Yeah.
Well, because you're going to be, you're less likely, one would imagine, if you've paid a deposit, to no show. Because I mean, the bigger problem, isn't it, is no shows. I mean, I've read lots of horror stories about, you know, restaurants, certainly in London and certainly around the city, having sort of 50% no shows. I mean, that's a disaster, because you think you've got that, you obviously staff up for it, you buy food for it, and you've got all the prep. So that causes the cost of a no-show is enormous, isn't it? Because you've got the fact you've staffed up, you've got the fact you've bought ingredients. So that causes, you know, that will be a big cost, bigger cost than people might actually think.
Yeah, and I imagine as well, you've just got me thinking here that there's another advantage to deposits in terms of pre-booking, because not only does it help deal with the issue of no-shows, but I guess there's also that increasing factor of people walking off at the end of a meal and not paying.
Well, that's very topical, isn't it? I mean, the sheer cheek of that as a thing, but unfortunately it happens, doesn't it? So you're right, it's an ancillary benefit. Certainly, as someone who's never done a runner from a restaurant, but I can imagine that if you were of that way inclined, but you'd already left the details of a card and assuming it wasn't a stolen card, you'd think twice, wouldn't you? Because you would, whatever the legality about the data which we said we check, the fact of the matter is, you know, they've got something that can identify you.
Yeah, so this all ties in, I guess, with the wider issue of, you know, a booking software system, making reservations, using card payment details in advance. Just picking up on some of the points that we've already discussed, you're basically saying that, you know, restaurants have the advantage of knowing that somebody's booked a place, knowing that they need to get a requisite amount of ingredients, of staff, of service in place to deliver to that customer who they know is coming. They've got some money with them. Add in the fact that you could have gift cards provided as well. Again, as we've talked about the benefits of that in addition. But also you've got that idea that people are very, very unlikely to be running off out of a restaurant when they've actually provided their card details and booked their place in advance. Yeah.
Yes, I mean it's all things that, I mean, that would help a restaurant with planning. One would imagine a lot in terms of, you know, everything. So yes, you know, the no-show issue is a big issue. So if you can cut that by taking a deposit, or even just registering card details, because I mean that's a commitment in its own right, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you know, cash is becoming, I guess, less of an issue these days in a lot of commercial settings. But it's very interesting. This point that we keep seeming to come back to is around VAT as well, effectively not becoming chargeable for the restaurant owner until that point of actual delivery of the service.
It's the fact that the restaurant has provided the service, the meal, and the customer is paying for it. That is the supply of service, and then the payment for the service.
Gotcha.
That's the key point.
Gotcha. Great. Okay, so let's turn to the issue of VAT rates and hot and cold food. Are there any differences in how it's charged or not charged, and why?
Now you've hit a real minefield, Mark.
Go on then, tell me
Yeah.
everything.
No, it's a very interesting one. So the standard rule is that all hot food that's designed to be eaten on premises and or taken from premises is vatable.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some exceptions. So there's I mean, if anyone is really interested, there's a VAT notice called 709/1.
Right, caption. Okay, yeah.
I know I've got to get my plugs in for HMRC, but which is actually quite well written, if I'm honest, which gives lots of the exceptions. So as an example, again, you probably shoot me for mentioning someone else. I bought a Greggs sausage roll the other day,
Right.
and it was interesting because I noticed there was no VAT on my receipt. That's right, and the reason there was no VAT on my receipt is because the fact that it was warm, because they cooked it and I was buying it to take out, and the fact that it was warm, it wasn't deemed VAT, but the fact it was warm is deemed under VAT rules to be incidental in that case, because they're not going to reheat it for me. So if they reheated it, it's vatable. If they're not, it isn't. It's really odd set of rules, and a lot of places get caught out with those sorts of little tweaks.
So, I mean, tell me a bit more. Why has that process come about, or is it some kind of mystery for the ages that we'll never know the answer to?
Well, it's a mystery. I mean, the thing is, then you get into the thing of what's the definition of hot food. Yeah, and that's where that VAT notice is very handy, because it defines what hot food is, and it's broadly, is it designed to be consumed on premises? Would it destroy your enjoyment of the product if it was a cold product? So you could eat a Greggs sausage roll hot or cold or warm, to be fair. Whereas I guess I just take another example, a cold curry probably isn't to everyone's taste.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, what's the key takeaway? Pardon the pun for
Well, no, it's a great pun.
for all restaurant owners. What can they learn from this? Is there a way perhaps of adapting their practices a little bit more widely so that they can benefit from this rule?
When I was a lot younger, which obviously was a long time ago, I always remember that there was a restaurant local to me that set itself up, and it was a curry place, and it always sold its meals as cold meals, and you took them home to reheat.
Right. Okay.
And they did that to avoid the VAT, so they were a non-vatable product.
Oh, right. So do you have a recommendation on this front as to what people should or should not be doing, or are you merely a neutral observer?
No, I'm going to be a neutral observer. The VAT rules are so complicated that I could inadvertently lead someone down the wrong track. I think I mean, we're exploring ideas and concepts. I think if you want to actually do any, you need to take your own advice from your own accountants.
Yeah. Okay.
You could fill your house with the VAT rules.
Well, again, sounds like an awful lot of fun, but probably more fun filling your house with curry, I guess.
I would think I'd agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So picking up really the final point that I just wanted to ask you about, and I think it perhaps ties in quite closely with what we've just discussed, is can you tell me a bit more about how VAT works for dining in versus takeaway? I mean, is it purely down to the issue of hot food, cold food, or is there something else at play here?
No, it's all around the hot food and cold food issue. If you bear with me, I'll read the definition, because it's an interesting definition.
Okay.
So the liability of a takeaway food and drink is it has to meet certain tests. Yeah.
Okay.
Cold takeaway food and drink is 0 rated, as long as it's not of a type that is always standard rate. This is where VAT is so complicated. So
right.
Take a packet of crisps, that would always be vatable regardless.
Okay.
Yeah, but a hot takeaway could, you have to do more research, but could be VAT free in certain circumstances. But then you've got it. So back to my curry example from days past.
Now, I mean, it sounds like I can almost imagine the lawyer for my restaurant on stand, sort of like arguing over what the
therein becomes the problem, doesn't it? A lot of these things, because a lot of the rules sound contradictory.
Yeah.
And it's a minefield. So I mean, deep down, the easier thing is to charge VAT, and because because essentially you are going to be providing a hot food service. I think it becomes very complicated to do a mix of hot and cold food.
Right. So, I mean, is there a way of I mean, I understand what you're saying. It does sound complex. It does sound a little bit of a minefield. But is there a way of simplifying this? So, if I'm understanding correctly, it seems what you're saying is that when it comes to takeaway meals, it can become quite difficult for a restaurant if they offer a mix of hot and cold food. Am I understanding that correctly?
You are only in terms of the definition of when it is hot, because the key is the hot bit. The key definition word is the hot bit.
Right. Okay. And I
Yeah,
mean,
so
are you saying in any sense that it makes sense almost for a restaurant that is dabbling in takeaways or delivering a takeaway service to simply charge VAT to cover themselves and then try and like figure out the minutiae later?
I think and take proper professional advice on their exact circumstance. Yes.
Okay, and does your common or garden accountant have that level of knowledge, or do you need to be working with somebody who specialises in the hospitality sector?
Well, it's probably better to take someone who specialises in the hospitality sector, because
Right.
it's specific rules. But I mean, but having said all of that, there's plenty of people who are actually just VAT experts who would be able to help as well.
Okay, and I mean, have you noticed any particular trends in the wider restaurant sector in this respect? Are some restaurants doing one thing and some restaurants doing another?
No, I've seen one restaurant in my entire sort of nearly 60 years on the planet doing cold only takeaway, which was my
Right.
example from years ago. I've never seen another one. And I guess the thing is the immediacy of a takeaway. So that was the whole. That's the up and the down of it, isn't it? Most people, I'm guessing, would buy a takeaway in the evening. I mean, and do you want to be bothered with warming it up? And certainly today, with all the convenience of the home delivery.
Yeah, I mean, have things changed sort of significantly, would you say, since the pandemic years that we've been through? You know, because obviously we had a lot of restaurants, I guess, transfer their services over to offering takeaways that previously it never would have really, you know, come into their realm to do that kind of thing.
No, it's very true, isn't it? I mean, certainly a restaurant that was by me, they had only just opened actually, and they pivoted not to doing takeaways as we would know. They sold pre-prepared meals for you to take home to cook. So they would give you all of the ingredients and then a little sheet with your cooking instructions.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating,
And
isn't
obviously
it?
a nice bottle of wine.
I wonder how many organizations this kind of like area is hitting or becoming, you know, something that they started dabbling with during COVID and maybe they've continued on with afterwards.
I've certainly not noticed it continuing. That was the thing. I mean, in a way, it's a shame, but the problem with nowadays, I suppose, and it's at risk of sounding old, is everything is immediate, isn't it? Everyone wants everything now. So the idea of buying ingredients, it's almost like a bit like going to a supermarket, buying what you want, then preparing what you want and cooking it. People tend, I mean, certainly going by my own children and probably my own behaviours, to be fair, I want it whatever, and I want it now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think you're right. You know, the convenience, the delivering to your door, the immediacy, they've all become factors in today's get it to me right now.
Well, the whole issue, the whole thing of dark kitchens and home delivery is a massive recent change in the market, isn't it? That's, you know, really pushed along, I suppose, in the pandemic. Because I mean, you know, now people can press a app on their phone and however long later it turns up at your front door.
Amazing. Yeah. So anything else to add on the VAT side? Anything that we haven't covered that you think that restaurants should know about?
No, not really. I think, you know, people do the key takeouts for me, again, at risk of a poor pun, is that is this thing about the gift cards and deposits. I think they're quite a helpful thing for a restaurant to get right, so that when you do the VAT, I mean, the rest of it is fairly standardized how it works, and there are certain circumstances where you could not do that. But again, it wouldn't really apply to a restaurant. It may apply to a takeaway, but a takeaway only.
Brilliant. Okay, well, listen, Steve Fleming, Financial Director at Favouritetable, thank you so much for joining me. It's been brilliant to chat. Now, if anyone out there, any restaurant owners in particular, would like to find out more about Favouritetable, simply visit restaurant.favouritetable.com online, and you'll find out everything that the company and organisation has to offer. And in the meantime, I'd just like to say, Steve, thanks so much for finding time to chat with me about VAT and restaurants, and I hope that we can catch up again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It's been a pleasure